Chapter 7. Tough Decisions. During my final years with the WWF, there were investigations about steroid use and molestation of young boys who served as ring attendants. There was no doubt in my mind that wrestlers used steroids. Hulk Hogan admitted it. Other people have. Other people haven't. In my experience, I've never seen a guy shoot himself up. They didn't do it in the dressing room around me because I didn't do it. I never saw it. Besides, this is a cutthroat business and there would be some guy who would run to the promoter and say, "I saw so-and-so with a turkey baster up his ass. What we do?" Vince McMahon was acquitted and cleared of any involvement. Honestly, I simply don't know if steroids were in the WWF locker rooms or not. There was a big stink made about it. That trial cost Vince millions of dollars and the jury found him not guilty. It came down to Vince having a lot of money and a great lawyer. Justice prevailed. I had to go before the grand jury about steroid use in the WWE. I told them the truth. I never saw steroids. I saw a lot of guys with paper bags, but that was it. I know that George Zaharian, the doctor who was convicted in another trial, would show up in Hershey wearing a long, white coat and carrying 2 big doctor bags. There would be a line outside his door. I went to him once to get some water pills to lose some weight I was retaining. He offered to give them to me for $5 a pill. Then he told me I'd have to urinate all the time. I couldn't do a broadcast for 3 hours when I had to pee every 30 seconds. Besides, I could have gotten a prescription for the pills from my own doctor. As for the molestation, these were young guys who wanted to get into the business like I did. Many were troubled souls from broken homes. When I saw them, I could tell they had problems. I put up the ring too when I was a kid. I carried the jackets as well. But I was never propositioned by a man or forced into a sexual relationship to get ahead in the business or keep my job. At least Crusher didn't kiss like he was gay. No one ever propositioned me. I knew Mel Phillips, a WWF ring announcer, was a little odd because of the stories I've heard about a foot fetish, but that's all hearsay. I don't know the personal lives of the rest of the WWF staff, and whether they were gay or not. I didn't pay attention to those guys. I don't look at guys. When I get into the dressing room, I try to rib them, hide their shoes, or do something important. There are single guys who fool around. There are married guys who go back to their rooms alone. There are guys who want to smoke a little. There are guys who want to drink a little. And there are guys who don't do anything. I was at Video One, Vince's television studio. When Vince would audition announcers, he would always want someone else to do an interview with them. They would send me in with the person who was auditioning to do 2 different kinds of interviews, one with a baby face and one with a heel. The prospective announcer would introduce me and I would walk onto the set. When I'd play the heel, I'd say, "Where did you come from? How did you get this job? Do you know somebody with power?" Some would come back with stupid comments. One day I'm in the studio and I see this person auditioning. He later sued the WWF claiming that a WWF employee sexually harassed him. I overheard Vince say, "Who the hell is that?" "That's the guy that's auditioning for the announcing job," said one of the production people. "Huh," Vince grunted. That was never a good sign. The new announcer came to a production meeting and he was introduced to everyone. I never saw anyone approach him. Vince simply didn't like his style. I heard the stories about him getting propositioned, but I don't think he was around long enough. Vince didn't even know who the guy was. As Monsoon would say, don't commit his name to memory. He won't be here that long. And he wasn't. It just didn't work out. Vince told us that when everything was going good, people wanted to knock you and bring you down. We thought that's what was going on. Nothing ever came of it. Vince is still in business and he still has his people. My WWF contract was up in 1993, and Vince McMahon gave me an offer for a new contract. A week later, he told me that he couldn't honor that offer and wanted me to take a 50% pay cut. I didn't want to do that. I was tired of going to New York, tired of crowds, and tired of people. It was just hard to get around. I decided it was time to go. At the production meeting before my last show, Vince asked me how I wanted to leave. I told him to have Gorilla Monsoon just throw me out after going through my bags and finding stolen towels, light bulbs, ashtrays, and phone books. Everything from a hotel. That's what the brain would do. Pat Patterson asked me, "Why don't you have a bra and panties in there too?" "Well, Pat, I think when we travel, you and I pack differently." I told him. Vince agreed to it. So Gorilla came to ringside where I was doing commentary. He threw me and my bag out of the building. I gave my farewell and walked around the back. Gorilla was waiting for me in his car and we drove to the LaGuardia Holiday Inn. We quietly stood in the elevator, which took us to the floor where our rooms were. I turned to him and said, "Well, 9 years together. Good luck, partner." I shook his hand. He went his way. I went mine. I got into my room. There was a big basket of fruit in there, all bananas. I called Gorilla. "I have some bananas here. Do you want them?" He came down the hall, and I gave him his favorite fruit. We must have hugged and cried for an hour. Gorilla Monsoon's real name was Robert Morella. Before he wrestled, he was a singer in Toronto called Gino Morella. Doing primetime in a studio and voiceover work for Wrestling Challenge was repetitious since we were seeing the same match 4 to 5 times a week. But working with Gorilla Monsoon was a joy, the highlight of my career. He was the most honest, gentle, intelligent man I ever met. He had a tremendous mind. He was educated and smart. And he knew about the human body, including all the muscles and parts. He would yell, he kicked him in the gluteus maximus. I'd say, yeah, he kicked him in the butt. To Thimble, playing blackjack and cards. He always carried about $25,000 in cash. I would ask him, "What would you do with all that money?" He'd say, "What if I want to buy something?" "What? A house?" I said, "If you're driving through Green Bay, maybe you should buy the football team and a bratwurst." He was very family-oriented, and when Joey, his boy and a referee for the WWF, was killed in a car accident, that took his heart out of him. When I left and there was no more prime time, his desire to work diminished. Primetime Wrestling, a show we co-hosted on the USA Network, was the #1 show on that channel. We didn't have the number of homes with cable that they do today, but we were getting 6s and 7s in the Nielsen's. We didn't just do wraparounds of the matches, we sat there for 3 hours and watched them. Gorilla wanted to do it that way. If something happened in a match, we could talk about it. And we never once used a script. The best primetime we ever did was on Halloween one year. We sat out on the set with Monsoon wearing a big ape suit with his sports coat over it. He was wearing his Rolex and his ring that said Gino on it. We did the whole show with him wearing the mask. Toward the end of the show, we took one of the cameramen who was the same size as Monsoon and put him in the gorilla suit with the jacket. Monsoon was standing off stage when the cameras started rolling. I was wrapping the show up when Monsoon ran onto the set with luggage, saying, "I'm sorry I'm late. Who the hell have I been with for 2 hours?" I cried, and we went off the air. In addition to his television duties, Monsoon would sit backstage in the aptly named gorilla position, directing traffic during tapings. On television, the finishes of the matches were carefully timed out. If it was a 6-minute match, Gorilla would say to Mel Phillips, the ring announcer, through his headset, "Give it to him, Mel." After 4 minutes, Mel would put a pencil in his mouth. When the referee or the wrestlers saw the pencil in his mouth, they knew they had 2 minutes to finish the match. The appropriate time came and Gorilla said, "Give it to him, Mel." Mel put the pencil in his mouth. But the wrestlers wouldn't go home. Home signifies the dressing room, and going home means that you end the match. Monsoon kept yelling into the headset, "Give it to him, Mel." By this time Mel had 4 pencils in his mouth and no one was looking at him. The 6'8", 400-pound ape calmly put his headset down and walked into the arena, past all the people who don't know the inner workings of the business. He got to the edge of the ring and bellowed loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Go home." We stayed in touch after I left. I would visit him and we would talk on the phone every week. Gorilla is one of my best friends in life. He is dearly missed by me and my family. I love that man. One of the few times I didn't work with Monsoon was when McMahon wanted to do a half-hour program called The Bobby Heenan Show. It was basically a half hour within the block that Primetime had. I would have guests on the show, including Heather Hunter, who was a porn star. McMahon had Jim Troy go to the USA Network to make the deal, but the guy never went and did it. McMahon had a contract with USA for 2 hours of wrestling. The USA claimed that they weren't getting 2 hours of wrestling, but 90 minutes of wrestling and a half hour of the Bobby Heenan Show. They were never talked to about it and never gave their okay. That was different programming in their eyes. We ended up doing only 4 episodes. The Bobby Heenan Show was fun, but it was hard to do at first. There was no audience and no band. I was making fun of these people on the show, but there was no timing and no one laughing. It was like looking in the mirror and telling yourself jokes. It just wasn't funny. The Rosity sisters served as my oink-ettes for the show. They were really sisters and longtime wrestling fans from around Poughkeepsie, New York. Vince liked them for some reason and always gave them front row seats. They weren't rats, unattractive wrestling groupies, and didn't do anything with the boys. One night they were sitting in the front row of Madison Square Garden wearing pig snouts. I had Howard Finkel give me the microphone. In front of 20,000 people, I said, "Be quiet for a minute. This is very important." I pointed to the rosettes and their pig snouts. "Look at these three. Look at their faces. Can you imagine that? They're actually wearing lipstick." Vince eventually changed the format of prime time because he likes change. I also think that the original prime time was doing so well. There was a jealousy factor with some people. I've learned that, in this business, there are some that will cut their nose off to spite their face. Vince and I co-hosted the new prime time, this time with a live audience that was actually WWF office employees. After work, they'd have to come over and sit in the audience. And they couldn't go home until we were done. We taped 3 shows, and Vince was the kind of guy that if he started live TV at 8 o'clock, he started at 8 o'clock. But if he started taping at 8 o'clock, he started at 10:30 because he didn't have to go on the air live. He ran everything during the show, taking phone calls and being bugged by people with problems and questions he had to answer. We'd usually be done by midnight. Regular wrestling fans would have gone home. The employees were not even allowed to go to the bathroom during the taping, because you would have empty spots in the audience. We weren't the Academy Awards where we had people to fill spots. It was a long day for all of us. On the show, Vince would still wear colorful outfits, but these were wild-looking sweatsuits merchandise he was advertising for the World Bodybuilding Federation. I would tease him, obviously, some cheap motel is missing a shower curtain. Sean Mooney, another WWF announcer, eventually took over for Vince on prime time. After Sean left the WWF and was passing his resume around in the television industry, he never included his job in the WWF. He didn't even mention Titan Sports. There was absolutely no mention of wrestling. He was a handsome guy and looked good on TV, but maybe he was too good looking. Maybe he would have looked too good in one of those sweatsuits. Vince would not have liked that. I left the WWF in December without a job. I really wanted to get into acting, doing commercials and endorsements. But no one wanted to touch me because of wrestling. I soon realized that to be an actor, you have to live in Los Angeles and be out there for all the calls. I didn't want to fly from Tampa. I got a call from Eric Bischoff at WCW, and he made me an offer to work 1 day a week for the same money Vince had offered me. At that time, my daughter Jessica was going to the University of Alabama. I lived in Tampa and would work in Atlanta, which was only 200 miles from her. Once a week, I could go up and see her for lunch. That's why I took the job with WCW. This is the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed this program. Please like and subscribe. Comments help the algorithm. See you next time.